This video is about answering questions from several friends regarding the interpretation of Thomas Sowell's The Fallacies of Social Justice. Here are our responses for your reference. Question 1. If people are inherently unequal and there are natural differences between individuals, does that make oppressing and discriminating against others justified? Reply. Indeed, differences exist between individuals, some of which are innate and inherited. This understanding has led to various misconceptions, even among well-educated individuals. However, after extensive research and reading, it is essential to clarify these issues. I want to discuss a crucial understanding, and I must make this point clear. 1. The differences between individuals far outweigh the differences between populations in different regions. The differences between populations in different regions are much smaller than the differences within the same population living in different areas. The differences within the same area among different individuals are much larger than the regional differences. 2. Are there differences between races? Yes, there are. However, the differences between two races are much smaller than the differences within the same race among individuals living in different regions. Moreover, the differences between populations in different regions are much smaller than the differences within the same region among different individuals. Whether it's intelligence, height, or athletic talent, much of it is indeed innate. The gap between two individuals, like Chin being good at math and Zhang being fast at running, might be something you can't compensate for no matter how hard you try. However, can you then claim that all black people are good at basketball, or all Chinese people are good at math? No, you can't. You need to understand that genetic differences follow a normal distribution. Most people are of average ability, and exceptional individuals are rare. If you randomly select a black newborn, I bet they won't become a basketball star in the future. In fact, most black people are not particularly good at basketball, just as most Chinese people are not mathematicians. The NBA stars are the result of an extreme selection process. Still, even in this case, there are white and Asian players like Yao Ming who make it to the Hall of Fame. Considering that individual differences are much more significant than racial differences, if I were a scout for a youth club, I definitely wouldn't completely give up on a race. A rational approach would be to give everyone from different races equal opportunities to showcase their performance. Sowell, in his book, cites data indicating that the intelligence of white people from isolated mountainous areas is lower than that of black people from open urban areas. We Chinese can relate to this. There's a significant gap in average intelligence among different regions in China, but since we are mostly Han Chinese, there's not much racial discrimination. However, there's a lot of regional bias. Yet, if you know many outsiders, you'll realize that regional bias is very minimal, because every region has a diverse range of people. Regions and races, in essence, are just averages. Without individual information, these labels can provide some superficial Bayesian predictions. Still, once you can see the individual, those labels become meaningless. If you ask a girl from Shanghai if she would marry someone from, let's say, Heilongjiang, please note that I'm from Heilongjiang, so this is self-deprecating, she might say she wouldn't want to marry someone from a third-tier city. But if you introduce Zhang Yi, a famous actor from Heilongjiang, and say, would you consider marrying this man? He is a renowned actor, has a great personality, and happens to be from Heilongjiang, the girl from Shanghai probably wouldn't care about the Heilongjiang label. That's why for university admissions and job recruitments, grades, qualifications, and practical work experience are much more important than regional and racial labels. Actually, if you have information about grades, qualifications, and practical work experience, the regional and racial information becomes irrelevant. So, why does American society place such emphasis on race? On the one hand, it's due to the historical shackles of slavery, and on the other hand, there's an availability bias at play. When you randomly meet someone on the street, it's challenging to determine their cultural background or where they come from, but race is something written on their face. Starting by looking at race is a cognitive bias, not the most reasonable prediction method. The most important differences are those between individuals, but these differences are not as easy to measure as race. This is actually a good thing, indicating that the factors influencing individuals are extremely complex, and it also implies the potential for personal change. Parameters like intelligence and height are not determined by one or two genes, but are the result of the interaction of hundreds of genes. Scientists don't even know how to customize a smart baby. Moreover, what genes can determine is limited, and postnatal environment and cultural factors are crucial. Besides, modern society provides a stage for various talents, and it's not just about a few qualities. The existence of racial discrimination has reasons, but those reasons are not sophisticated. The differences between populations are there, but those differences are not significant. Question 2. Many self-righteous intellectuals have brought negative impacts to society. In that case, what principles should intellectuals adhere to? Should they speak less? However, how can an intellectual who speaks very little be considered as an intellectual? Reply. I believe the primary task of intellectuals is to explore the truth of the world and create new possibilities. Mr. Xinji Hua is a renowned historian with significant influence. Once, in an interview, the host asked him about his views on learning from history. Xinji Hua responded, "Learning from history has nothing to do with me. As historians, our task is to discover the truth of history and present it faithfully to the public. As for any lessons or rules you may derive from it, that's your business." This is a remarkable boundary, and I see it as the most fundamental quality of an intellectual. Now, if you argue that intellectuals must speak to the public, especially when some experiences and lessons need summarizing, what should be done? Perhaps the best answer lies in Professor Luo's concept of being a knowledge servant. I provide you with reference materials, maybe with a few suggested options, but the final decision rests with you. You are responsible for the outcome, and I am responsible for ensuring that the information and suggestions align with the current scientific understanding. I can't shirk my responsibility. The accountability is clear because you subscribe to our service. In the absence of a direct interest relationship, the public can only rely on intellectuals to speak conscientiously. Indeed, many intellectuals do so, because they value their reputation. However, over the past century, with the rise of media and later internet traffic, the importance of reputation has diminished compared to more direct influence and traffic, leading many intellectuals astray. This primarily happens in two scenarios. One is what we call providing emotional value. They say what you want to hear, you give them traffic, and they, in turn, gain benefits through other channels, such as advertising. In this case, rather than serving you, they're making you their product, they're serving the advertisers. An even worse situation is the propagandist or official mouthpiece. They say what those in power think you should hear. To illustrate with a doctor-patient analogy, a good doctor should explain your condition, outline available treatment options based on current scientific understanding, discussing the pros and cons of each. For instance, some medicines might show quick results, but have significant side effects, while others might be effective but expensive. You decide based on your own circumstances. But if the doctor only wants to provide emotional value, they might tell you that you're the healthiest person alive. Disregard what others say about atherosclerosis. All of us have this situation. Here are some traditional medicines, all tonics, give them a try. And if the doctor is a propagandist, they might start with some persuasion, saying, don't listen to others' heretical views. Only this medicine can save you. Question 3. If a country provides fewer welfare benefits, is it better for the lower class people? How do we explain the success of countries with high taxes and welfare policies? I feel like the lower class people in those countries should be quite happy, right? Reply. Welfare is not just about the wealthy transferring money to the poor. When you promote education, build infrastructure, and provide basic living and healthcare support to the lower class, preventing people from turning to crime, it benefits everyone. So, the relationship between taxes and welfare is a matter of balance. Even progressive nations won't set tax rates at 100%, and conservative nations won't completely avoid providing welfare. Specifically, we can categorize countries into 4 quadrants using the dimensions of tax and welfare, aligning with Mr. Chin Huey's classification based on government power and responsibility. The first type is high tax and high welfare, represented by Nordic countries like Denmark and Sweden. These countries prioritize fairness, embodying the concept of social democracy. In Chin Huey's terms, this corresponds to a government with significant power and responsibility. If the government does something good for the people, it's expected, and if it falls short, people demand accountability. The second type is low tax and low welfare, with the U.S. being a typical example among developed nations. While the welfare system in the U.S. is relatively good compared to developing countries, theoretically, if someone can't afford healthcare or college, you can't blame the government because it hasn't collected enough taxes. This represents a limited responsibility government, or in Chin Huey's words, classical liberalism. The third type is low tax and high welfare, illustrated by Greece. Greeks enjoy generous welfare benefits, despite a relatively lackadaisical work ethic. This is partly due to Greece being an EU member and benefiting from the wealthier nations. However, this model is unsustainable, leading Greece into a debt crisis. The fourth type enforces high taxes and low welfare. Here, the government collects a substantial amount of money but doesn't directly distribute it to improve citizens' lives. Instead, it undertakes major projects or initiatives, with a large government presence but limited responsibility. Some welfare is provided, but often it's tiered, with the lower class receiving the least.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.